Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Monday, February 22nd. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 192 days. The game against Michigan in 278 days. That, of course, a countdown to the football game against Michigan, but the Buckeyes and Wolverines played a pretty remarkable game of basketball yesterday as well. Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman? I know his name. I've talked to him before. No big deal. Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman is my guest this morning. And Tony, that sure felt like a matchup of two of the very best teams in the nation and ones that might maybe see each other again with maybe the Big Ten Tournament Championship or possibly even the National Championship on the line.
I definitely think so. Dwayne Washington, after the game, even said that they expect this won't be the last time they see Michigan. And it wouldn't be surprising if this is just the first of three matchups this year between these three teams. See them once in the Big Ten and see them again in the NCAA Tournament. And it was a fun game to watch. It's also interesting to watch the reaction of other basketball people on Twitter watching this game and enjoying it, and just the high level, the high quality of the offense, and just the constant motion of the game and the movement, and 16 total turnovers, which is pretty outstanding for just a really good offensive game to watch. Really crisp, entertaining throughout. Haymaker after haymaker, and two quality teams. If this is half of the Final Four, would anybody be surprised? I don't think so.
No, and I don't think anyone would complain either. I mean, that was you get one or two more of those games. I think anyone would take that because no one pulled away. No one was no one had an 18-point lead where the game felt over. I mean, it was right down to the last couple minutes before you felt like there was a decent chance you knew who was going to win, and even then, Ohio State almost came back and pulled it out. Let's start, first of all, I mean, obviously Ohio State did lose 92-87, but let's start with the good news. It ended up 92-87, which to me felt significant because to me, one of the big questions for this team was, would Ohio State be able to score like that against a team that was as good defensively as Michigan? I mean, Michigan is top 10 in defensive efficiency in KenPom, or at least was entering the game. They might not be anymore. And the Buckeyes just rained buckets all game. They shot 53% from the field in each of the two halves, 50% from three in the game. To me, I think that may have answered some questions about whether a really good defensive team might be able to just completely shut this Ohio State team down.
Yeah, there's so many different guys that can do this for the Buckeyes. I guess Rutgers head coach Steve Pickiel said that Michigan's defense was the best he's seen in the Big Ten in his time in 5 years. And so that's a pretty bold statement. Chris Holtmann thought that was brought up to him on Friday about just that's a pretty significant statement. He's like, wow, if Steve is saying that, it kind of gelled with what he was seeing, but to have other coaches say that as well, and then to go and score 87 points against arguably the best defense the Big Ten has seen in 5 years or so. The Big Ten is a very good defensive conference. We know that, and so if you're doing that against a program like Michigan, you would think you could pretty much do it against anybody. The flip side of that, of course, is the 92. But the 87, when you're getting very little from a number of guys, but getting very much from others is key. And I asked Chris Holtmann about that on Friday. I said, you guys have and I've said it on here, I believe 7 or 8 guys that can give you 10 to 15 any given night. Would you rather have just 3 or 4 guys that you always know what you're going to get, or have this group that you don't know what you're going to get, but you've got enough guys that can pick up the slack? And they say it doesn't really have a preference, but this is just what they're going to have to do this year with this team, because while you're pretty much going to get something from EJ Liddell and Dwayne Washington every night, it's those other 6 or 7 guys where you don't know exactly where it's going to come from, but somebody's going to step up. And even in this one, CJ Walker, I think, was the only other guy in double figures, and still 87 points. And Justice Suing didn't have his best game. Seth Towns still a little banged up. Kyle Young is always banged up, and Justin Arns was kind of a defensive issue. Holtmann wanted more size and against Michigan size, and so they didn't really play him all of that much, and yet you still get 87 points, and it's a testament to the guys, the Ohio State offense, and just EJ Liddell, Dwayne Washington for and never forcing it, and when they did force it, They were successful, although I will say EJ Liddell probably forced a few shots against Hunter Dickinson, and maybe at the end, I think there was a little fatigue there setting in as well.
Yeah, and just to run through your point in a little more detail, Justice Suing had 6 points, 3 boards, 3 points from Seth Towns, who, as you mentioned, is still banged up. 2 points from Zed Keys, 0 points on just 2 shots in 15 minutes from Justin Arns. Like Justin Arns was like just a non-factor. Michigan locked him down very, very effectively. But Dwayne Washington had 30. EJ Liddell had 23. CJ Walker had 15. And I mean, that goes back to one of the things we've talked about before, that this team is not just dependent on 1 or 2 guys making shots. And when you have so many different ways to win, you don't have the Jamar Butler game where it's like, well, we need Jamar Butler to shoot a bunch of, make a bunch of threes. And then if he goes whatever, 2 for 18, the old Knicks fan in me thinks of that as the John Starks game for traumatic reasons. You don't have that, because if one guy's off, like, there are plenty of other ways to solve that problem. Another thing that I think was a positive for Ohio State, even with that loss, was they dealt with the press well. We haven't seen a ton of press this year. Michigan wasn't like running like the Nolan Richardson 40 minutes of hell or anything, but it was, when they were getting pressed, they dealt with it really well. There was one stretch when CBS put up a graphic that Ohio State had 1 turnover in the previous 15 or 16 minutes, and I don't remember them turning it over much after that, and either. And 9 turnovers overall, as you mentioned. And there was the one very bad one that everyone is thinking of right now, that Justice Suing behind the back pass that went to no one and led to an and one for Michigan. But again, this is one of these things where, like, how are they going to shoot against a good defense? Okay, maybe cross that off the list of concerns. How are they going to be able to handle? Are they going to be able to handle pressure if teams try and press them? Like, okay, maybe that's another thing you can cross off the list of concerns.
It is interesting watching this team when there are a couple turnovers in a row, and it just catches you off guard, because that's not what this team does. And so it stands out. And they had that late in the game. Dwayne Washington had a turnover while Ohio State was like up 2, or CJ Walker had one, and then Dwayne Washington had one a minute later that was before the Justice Suing thing. And so, yeah, it is almost jarring when stuff like that happens with this team, because you don't expect it, and because they haven't been. They take really good care of the ball, and so when they have a run or a rut of turnovers, it catches your eye. But yeah, they handle, when you've got different guys that can bring the ball up. It doesn't just have to be CJ Walker. And we've talked in the past about why don't more teams pressure them, and I think maybe we'll see some of that in either of the tournaments. But for what Michigan offered them, they took all of it in stride and handled it, and it's a credit to their starting point guard is Justice Suing at this point, and they get so much out of different guys. And EJ Liddell is bringing the ball up at some points today on Sunday because his defender is just heading into the paint, getting ready to defend the paint, and so everybody contributes in their own unique ways, and they. Even if they're not scoring, you're still getting stuff from Justice Suing. And so I think that's why Holtmann, he said a month ago he's going to start shrinking the lineup, and he hasn't been able to, because they're still playing all of these guys. Like, everybody has a little role. Like, Eugene Brown's role is to come in the last minute or two of the first half and give somebody a break so that they don't pick up an extra foul. And Michi Johnson as well. And Musa Jallow wasn't in this game, and you wonder, would his defense have helped alleviate some of the pressure? But overall, just Holtmann said after the game, I can't fault the guys. It was just one of those games where you just didn't have enough at the end, basically. And Michigan was just, I think it's almost like, I don't want to compare Michigan basketball to Alabama football, but there's so much pressure to make every possession count. And I think down the stretch, Ohio State just faltered a little bit, because they knew, like, you can't go 2 possessions in a row without getting something, because Michigan is likely going to build on a lead or erase your own lead. And so there's pressure with each possession, even though they did really well handling it and making this game close. I still think there's pressure throughout that is tough to deal with.
Yeah. And I mean, when you can't stop the other team from scoring, that puts a lot of pressure on your offense. And Ohio State has we have talked a bunch this year already. Ohio State is a top 5 offense nationally and like a top 70-ish defense nationally. And, when you look at the statistical profile, when people are looking at Ken Palm on Selection Sunday and starting to fill out their brackets, that's something that they may circle as aha, what about this? This may be if I'm looking to pick an upset, is this something? And, a lot of that on Sunday was they don't have anyone that can be a great matchup for a big who can score. And Michigan freshman Hunter Dickinson had 22 points in 29 minutes. That then, without having the big body down low to defend him, then the Buckeyes ended up having to cheat a little bit to maybe, give a little soft double. That led to wide open threes. Michigan went, 11 for 13, 11 for 14 in the first half. I mean, just crazy, crazy numbers from three. I mean, that seems like maybe the most glaring potential issue in terms of a matchup. If you're looking on Selection Sunday and you see a team that has, one or two bigs who can really score, that's one of those like, Ohio State would like to not see one of those for as long as possible in March, probably.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think they did pretty well against Luka Garza, Iowa. They did really well against Kofi Coburn, Illinois. And they were doing well against Dickinson until he scored 10 of his 22 in the last 7 minutes of the game. And, there are some free throws in there, but it just, he was too much for them down the stretch with too much size, too much strength, the one or two dunks in there. And just Ohio State has nobody for him defensively, where they try to counter that then is now this guy has to go and guard EJ Liddell, and he can't. Mm-hmm. And as long as EJ Liddell is hitting shots, which he was, things are going pretty well. But then also EJ Liddell having to defend that, you kind of fade down the stretch. It gets harder to play offense down the stretch when you've been trying to defend a 7-2 guy for a lot of the game. And, Kyle Young was also doing it. But and there's more than just Dickinson to defend for EJ Liddell. It's just there's a lot of weight on his shoulders. And then when he's trying to score at the end and maybe forcing a couple of things, and you're trying to shoot over a guy who is half a foot taller than you, that's not easy. That's difficult to do. And that's a situation he ran into. And yet he still dropped 23 points, which is almost like a nightly occurrence for him right now.
Yeah. And that led me to a really weird train of thoughts, which ended with me wondering, how much would Caleb Wesson help this team right now? Had Caleb Wesson not left after last year? And I think when he left, I think we both sort of felt like, he's not going to do anything next year that's going to materially change his draft stock. So, you go get paid when you can go get paid. And, he is playing in the D League right now. And, you put him on this team with as good of a defender as he was down low, and potentially, the way they ran the offense through him at times last year, maybe you get some of the opposing bigs in foul trouble. It's like that's kind of like one of the missing pieces on this year's team. That's like, boy, with Caleb Wesson, they probably win that game against Michigan on Sunday. They maybe win some other ones earlier in the year. That it didn't seem like when he left, this is something that may cost them a national championship next year. But here we are.
Well, and you're saying that, and I'm thinking, I wonder if he knew how good Ohio State would be this year, if he knew he could be the difference between, or could be a contributing factor to a national championship, would he have stayed? And maybe that's a question, Tom, you should ask him instead of me. But I do think it would be fun just to watch him and EJ Liddell high-low teams, for 40 minutes and just do all of that passing back and forth and having some really good success there with those two. And then everybody else on the wings. Dwayne Washington, Justin Arns firing away. And yeah, boy, I don't think anybody would want to play Ohio State by any means, because you got Caleb Wesson would be arguably the best big in the league, but Luka Garza and plenty of others, as we've already mentioned, would be there as well. But you're talking about one of the best 3-point shooters now coming back, one of the best scorers, one of the best defensive bigs, and one of the best rebounders. But do you wonder, would they have, held anybody back developmentally of the guys who have stepped up at this point? EJ Liddell, for instance, would that have held him back? I don't think so. And I think that Ohio State team with Caleb Wesson back this year would be pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, that would certainly be an interesting alternate history for this year of Ohio State basketball for sure. Before we look forward to what's coming next for the Buckeyes, can we just take one moment to appreciate how entertaining that game was on Sunday? Like that was college basketball. You know, the quality can be kind of up and down. You can have the games where it's just like, oh, it's the ref show now. Great, fantastic, just what I wanted. That was awesome. That was a fantastic game. Both teams. They shot, I think, 84% from the line between the two of them. Both teams shot over 50% from the field in each of the two halves. So 4 halves of basketball between the two teams. They were over 50% in both halves. Both teams are under 10 turnovers. The refs mostly kept the whistles to themselves for most of the game and just let them play. And it didn't turn into like a real, old school Big Ten slugfest down low. This was not the bad boy Pistons kind of game with when the refs had the whistles away. It was just a fantastic basketball game. And I kept thinking during the game, man, if there was a crowd there, you go back to like the early 90s, Ohio State, Indiana double overtime game at St. John. And you think about how much the crowd, and I mean, it was a fantastic game, and the crowd and how crazy it was in there and how loud it was. Like if there was a crowd there, I mean, this is already probably a signature game in the shot. I mean, or like one of the top 5 greatest games played in the shot since they've played there. But man, with a crowd like that would have really taken it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, and the Schottenstein Center can get loud when fans want it to get loud and when they have something to cheer for. And I think this would have been one of those. I'm thinking if this game was at St. John, like any snow and ice on top of the roof would have vibrated off from and the heat as well. Like it would just, the movement in the arena would have shaken all of that. And yeah, it's unfortunate. And the players wanted it. The coaches, were upset. Like Holtmann said on Friday, it's too bad that people can't come and watch this game, because I think everybody knew it would be good. You didn't know how it was going to end up, but it would be something to watch. And on our Ask the Insiders message board, the people were in the thread the day before because they were excited about this one. And it lived up to the hype. And like I said, you saw national people talking about this game. I don't like the trend of college basketball games going to like 2 hours and 15, 2 hours and 20 minutes. I have no idea how long this game was. I assume it was in that sweet 2 hour window because it just moved. And until maybe the end where it drags on a little, but that's all basketball. And so it was just, you're never like, oh gosh, refs are just stopping it. Refs are just annoying, eliminating any flow. This entire game was flow. I mean, it was like watching, fast moving river of basketball.
That was the very, very, very end of the game was a little bit of a case for the Elam ending. Like that would have just kept that flow going a little bit. But yeah, it was I think just a touch over 2 hours and really entertaining throughout. Now Ohio State gets to go play. I don't know. I can't keep track. I guess Michigan State's little brother now in basketball, at least this year. So Ohio State gets to go up north and play Sparty on Thursday, back home for Iowa on Sunday, and then Illinois at home on March 6th. At this point, the Big Ten championship regular season is, pretty much gone for the Buckeyes. But, they certainly have an opportunity to make I don't expect them to drop a lot in the polls or in the rankings after a game like that against a team like that. So you have an opportunity now. You win these next 3 games, you're probably in a very, very, very good spot to be a number 1 seed in March.
Yeah, and I think we've seen the way the committee maybe sometimes doesn't pay attention to the Big Ten Tournament championship game. So it's like, as long as you get there, you pretty much whatever they've decided at that point for you. And I think if Ohio State gets there, I mean, I don't know even if you just want to make them the 4th seed, the 4th number 1, yeah, I think they would take that. And I don't know how you can look at this game and be like, let's drop Ohio State, say 3 spots or whatever. And it's because then they're just going to move them back. If they win these next few games, they're just going to move them back up. And I do think it was interesting that Chris Holtmann has held off on saying what he thinks should happen to the regular season Big Ten championship game, because he always knew this Michigan game was looming, and to speak out against it before the game, to say like, yeah, I think we should have it or whatever. And then you lose this game, and that now it makes like what you've said look just meaningless or petty. And so he has always avoided talking about what he thinks should happen with the regular season title. And now it's no longer a topic, basically, because Michigan beat you. And so now you just worry about these next game at a time, Thursday, and then the weekend, and then the weekend after that. And then you get ready for the tournament, the Big Ten tournament, where I think everybody would be surprised if Ohio State and Michigan don't meet up one more time.
Look at you thinking that a team beating another team should have any bearing on the narrative around a conference championship. Look at you not remembering football season. How adorable. Yeah, that's. I have a feeling you will probably not hear a lot of griping out of Ohio State on the fact that Michigan has played fewer games. That's just my guess. We'll see. Tony, thank you for joining us. Thank you guys all for joining us this morning. It was quite a weekend for Ohio State sports. That was a memorable game, even if it was not a winning game for the Buckeyes. And there is so much more coming, as we mentioned. A couple massive basketball games on the way in the next week or so, and plenty more really, really interesting sports coming as well. You can find all of that stuff, all of that great coverage at BuckeyeScoop.com. Our team of insiders is working overtime. We had a reporter at a 7-on-7 camp in Arizona over the weekend to track Keon Graves, who is one of the potential next commitments for Ohio State, wide receiver prospect out there, and lots of other additional great content at BuckeyeScoop.com. Also, make sure you check out all of our podcasts, Google Podcasts. No, not Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Yeah, Google Podcasts. Yeah, Google does podcasts. Google does everything. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, Spreaker, all those places. You can find them all there. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there. Also leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help us, help other people. Boy, it's Monday. Can you tell it's Monday? It's Monday. You can we'll help other people find these shows as well. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.